last little news nugget of today is going to be this article from News BTC and 3 recent incidents that prove Bitcoin is better than gold. And we just lost 10 Gold Bug subscribers, and that's totally fine. Very, very positive and bullish on gold. But Bitcoin is on another bullish tear over the last few days. It's just tested yearly highs at the $10,000 level again. And Bitcoin has seen its price explode now. So it's actually put in year-over-year end gains from the very lows of the March Meltdown, up over 100%. Meanwhile, on the year-to-date time frame, Bitcoin is still up over 30% from the price action we saw in May of last year. If Bitcoin was a traditional equity, that business would be worth more than Airbnb or Adobe at its current market capitalization of about 175 billion, that's Billy with a B, dollars. But as Bitcoin develops its use case or value proposition based on being scarce and therefore a store of value because it's unconfiscatable, of course, it's impossible to not mention this sort of competition with the precious metal gold, whose market cap is in the trillions of dollars, making it worth more than any individual stock or company in existence. But, of course, there's a lot of similarities between gold and Bitcoin. And, some would suggest that they're going to have a showdown. I don't know if that's necessarily, if that's necessary. Unfortunately, a lot of gold bugs, continue to hold to this idea that Bitcoin is a sham. Unfortunately, I've seen lately this kind of trend where Bitcoin advocates are saying that gold is also not valuable, that it is going to go the way of the dinosaur. I don't think that either of those arguments is true. I think that Bitcoin has a strong value proposition and gold has a strong value proposition. Gold has its historical legacy, also the fact that it is very difficult to counterfeit. And Bitcoin is Bitcoin, right? It is impossible to counterfeit. We know its max supply. Anthony Pompliano points out some very good points. Nobody knows the exact amount of gold in existence. Nobody knows how much gold was dug up out of the ground today. It is very difficult to measure, whereas with Bitcoin, the mathematics are more simple and clean. However, you can't deny the value propositions of gold, that, of course, it's been around for thousands of years. It's held its value. It can be utilized in industrial applications. It can be utilized in jewelry applications. It is beautiful to look at. Potentially that's why the aliens came down to Earth, whatever. For one thing, however, they do both behave as safe haven assets against geopolitical and macroeconomic risk, right? These are assets that we are seeing. Obviously, gold has this kind of bearer of being a safe haven asset. Like that's its original value proposition or role in the markets, one would argue. And Bitcoin, as we see, I've seen throughout time, although coupled to the S&P 500, tops and bottoms below it. So we can see that kind of, those who use Bitcoin as a leading indicator for the S&P 500 can hedge very nicely against the declines and swings of the S&P 500. Again, the main argument is that we will eventually see Bitcoin decouple from traditional markets like we might be seeing right now. Another similarity between gold and Bitcoin is that both are considered speculative investments, right? This is the main argument. If you go to a traditional financial advisor, they'll tell you, well, both gold and Bitcoin are speculative. And again, because it's true, right? Obviously I would say that gold is less speculative than Bitcoin because it does actually have real world industrial applications as a commodity in and of itself, whereas Bitcoin does not. Bitcoin's value proposition is that other individuals, and one could even say that Bitcoin's value proposition is the greater fool theory, that Bitcoin will always appreciate in value because there will always be someone in the future that is willing to pay more for it, depending on the circumstances surrounding Bitcoin. And the value propositions of Bitcoin that lend credence to this are, of course, its scarcity, its unconfiscatable nature, its portability, its security, all of the things that we've talked about with Bitcoin a lot. But Bitcoin doesn't have any real world commodity applications besides being a store of value and a medium of exchange. So again, the United States dollar is the same thing. One could argue a speculative asset because its value is derived from the faith of its user base, right? What gives the United States dollar value is the faith of individuals that transact with it, that other individuals are willing to accept it in exchange for something else. Other thing, obviously things about the United States dollar is that it's, easily divisible. It's easily, it's portable. It's easy to transact. But of course, the digital entries in ledger books and the physical paper notes are worthless in and of themselves. They do not serve a large commodity product, except maybe as compost in the case of the linen dollar bills. And last, both, of course, tend to portray themselves as scarce assets against inflation worries, both kind of having this deflationary characteristic where Bitcoin is mathematically deflationary and gold is considered deflationary because of the difficulty to pull it out of the ground, because it requires investment to pull it out of the ground. Similarly, Bitcoin requires investment to mine it digitally. Now, despite this, many gold bugs and cryptocurrency naysayers are, continue to hold up this idea that Bitcoin is a scam, right? A lot of, very influential advocates of gold as a hedge are, very, very against Bitcoin, which doesn't really make sense to me. Of course, Peter Schiff being I saw something that made me laugh so much the other day. Somebody posted on Twitter, who's your favorite Bitcoiner to follow on Twitter? And Bully replied with Peter Schiff. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. And again, a lot of individuals who are really strong advocates of gold say that Bitcoin is a scam, even though we've seen Bitcoin grow astronomically and it's now almost 11-year lifespan. And as time passes and this current economic crisis continues to take its toll on our economy, it seems that Bitcoin is coming in and proving that it's stronger and stronger day by day, regardless of where the price is, right? It just seems that every time a convincing argument may or may not be made, and this is not really convincing, not to people who have done their research, but every time you see an influential article against cryptocurrency or Bitcoin in the mainstream, it just is, Bitcoin's like, oh, okay, I see you over there, Peter Schiff, and decides to pump 20%. And of course, it's in the current economic environment and climate that we find ourselves in that demand for these assets happens to be rising across the world. It's rising for gold. That's the oldest safe haven asset in the book. However, and what this article seeks to point out is that gold has some shortcomings in the modern world. These are things that Bitcoin enthusiasts are now taking the opportunity to, advocate and incentivize conversation about in the forums, in the marketplace of discussion, right? We'll kind of break down this article and look at 3 reasons why this article thinks that Bitcoin has a more attractive property than gold. And the first thing they point out here is the international oil deal that was not settled in USD. So 2 nations that have found themselves in a fairly deep hole recently, thanks to ongoing sanctions that have been placed on them by the United States, have joined forces last month to create a private commercial and financial agreement between them. This is, of course, Venezuela and Iran. And Venezuela's, some would say, non-democratically elected president, Nicolas Maduro, sent Iran about $500 million worth of gold via jets in exchange for Iran's help in reviving their battered oil industry. So Bitcoiner Stephen Cole pointed out on Twitter here that Maduro must have spent a small fortune moving this 9 tons of gold across the Atlantic Ocean and halfway around the world in order to get it to their new economic ally. Pointing out that had that $500 million been moved via a Bitcoin transfer over the Bitcoin network, the Venezuelan president could have had the money there for less than $3 in fees in as little as 2 confirmations. Think about this, and this is something that senior analyst Alexander covered very sublimely in his recent presentation on stocks to the premium members in last week's community mentoring session, where he talked about how, originally, if you look at the original creation of corporations, you were kind of investing in ships, honestly, right? And it was very dangerous to invest in ships, and this is why this idea of shares was created in the first place. The very first corporation was the East India, the East India Corporation. So this is one use case that demonstrates how Bitcoin is clearly cheaper to move and transfer, and saves you a lot of logistical nightmares of dispatching a dozen jets with the gold aboard, and maybe them getting shot down and needing military escorts that are needed to go with them. I mean, have you ever sent something extremely valuable in the mail? Like, for example, let's say you had let's say your net worth was like $150,000 and you had to withdraw $100,000 in cash and send it via the mail. I mean, you would be sweating bullets every night until you got the confirmation on the other end that they received that package. Even if you sent it through like FedEx or UPS, you would still be sweating bullets. And I don't sweat bullets when I send transactions across the Bitcoin network. So reason number 2. Give me back my gold. Getting back the gold that is sitting in other people's vaults is a problem, right? Venezuela was already in trouble before the coronavirus came along to spread its tendrils across the current global economy. And they were leaning even deeper into their gold reserves to just stay afloat, in the face of the ongoing United States sanctions. Now, while they were sending some of the gold kept on hand to Iran, Venezuela was also requesting that the third-party custodians of their gold, right, which were not in Venezuela, they were requesting that they sell the precious metal that they have, being held in custodianship, in order to raise cash for the troubled nation and to forward those funds to Venezuela immediately. Sadly, with the sanctions, Venezuela is pretty cut off from their gold reserves, which are held in vaults owned by multiple foreign financial institutions. This includes the Bank of England, among others. And as such, for example, the Bank of England has refused to hand back the 31 tons of gold to the current political regime in Venezuela because these Western superpowers do not see Maduro as a rightful leader of Venezuela. So they have refused him access to any of Venezuela's foreign-held gold. Now, I don't want to delve too deeply into the politics here, because while I do certainly agree that this is not a good choice for the country, I find it very convenient that they decide to not release the gold simply because they think that the dictatorship is illegitimate, right? Obviously Venezuela is dealing with a cratering oil market, oil representing the large majority of their wealth. And, Maduro is literally pleading with the Bank of England representatives to sell their gold to the United Nations and pass along the money to the country. But that request has mostly been ignored. So Venezuela as a country has all of this gold sitting in a vault somewhere that the, custodians of the vault will not release to them. And this leaves emerging nations and their central bank with a pretty lasting lesson, right? Anything that is yours is not really yours until you have it in your hands, and that you shouldn't trust the international banking cartel with managing your nation's gold reserves. So Bitcoin, of course, is better in this regard. The cryptocurrency stays with its owner, locked in a digital wallet protected by an uncrackable 16-word seed key or private key, depending on how you set it up. So in a scenario like, this one, Venezuela's unfortunate circumstance, if they were just keeping Bitcoin on hand instead, it would be a whole lot easier to open up that digital vault and sell what's needed online cheaply and easily from behind a computer terminal, rather than having to plead and cater to the Bank of England. Third reason here is faster recovery, the fastest recovery of all of the assets, because we all know by now that Bitcoin has recovered faster and stronger and harder, somebody play that Daft Punk, since the March Meltdown than any other traditional asset, even against gold's impressive 15% year-to-date March. Bitcoin on any time frame has been the most bullish asset in an overwhelming sea of red. And it's not just Bitcoin's price, but this overall global trend toward digitizing money itself. Society moving into a post-coronavirus world, which is going to look very different. Physical contact being made taboo, social distancing becoming the new normal, vaccines being pushed in individuals. The human race, human society is quickly adapting to operate digitally more than ever. And this is why you're seeing Bitcoin's use case exploding recently, because it is the most logical choice for adopting a worldwide currency. And also why you're seeing this trend towards central bank digital currencies, because no central bank wants to get left in the dust. So rather than leaving your house in order to physically move your gold from one hand to the next, you could just transfer Bitcoin pseudonymously from anywhere in the world, from one wallet in cyberspace to another. Being able to transact remotely, anonymously, and trustlessly is just not possible with gold the way that it is with Bitcoin. So let me know your guys' thoughts and comments in the section down below. Is there something that we missed? Is there something that this article missed? We injected our own thoughts and opinions into this, of course. Is there a use case for gold that we're missing? Obviously, digitizing gold tokens is an idea that many have decided to pick up and run with. But again, if you just look at the market has not been very excited about digitized gold. The market has been excited about Bitcoin. So again, let me know your opinions in the comment section down below. Do you agree with the author of this article? Do you disagree with him? Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? Let me know your thoughts.